their knowledge about their rights,
just to calm
including
things
increasing
down,
transparency
I'm thinking,
and accountability from mining companies. Oxfam South Africa believes that poverty and inequality cannot be reduced without considering the distribution of resources, ways to build sustainable livelihoods, and climate justice.
Today, I saw these
We
clouds
strengthen civil society organizations and communities as agents of change by
I saw them
focusing on
floating
community
in the
empowerment
skies
for
and not falling.
self-determination in the
I
extractive
saw them
industry.
dancing with the wind
We
and
do
not
this by
tumbling.
promoting free,
Then I
prior,
realized
and
that the
informed
spirit
consent,
of
which is an
Africa
international
is
right
still
that
circling
communities
above
have to
us,
be
unstoppable.
meaningfully included in development
And in these
projects,
blood-soaked
including
lands,
mining.
they
They
left
need to be
these
informed of
whispers
these benefits of development
know
for the
that
local
for truth
communities,
you can
and
die
transparency
like
about these
Jesus
is
on the cross
fundamental in
praying.
terms of both South
Forgive
African
them,
and
Father,
international law.
for they know not
The
what they
impact
do.
of such developments on the health
But
and
you can't
environment
stop these
must be
voices.
considered
They
before
will
any operations
forever be
can
telling
begin.
the truth, healing
For more
this
information,
nation's division.
visit
Listen to the cries of your hearts.
www.oxfam.org.za.
African people still struggling, to the beat of the drum dancing, with the beat of the heart chanting, He art, He art. Because in our hearts, He art that black fist of a young man dying, that black fist that lifted liberation from the gallows, the black fist of Matlangu. I'm talking about the black fist of Madikizela. To this fist I owe my freedom in this African kingdom, Savior. Before we globalize, liberate, we have to realize we can't segregate humanity. For humanity is one. I will raise this black fist till I'm done with so much pain and suffering. I'm just beginning with this teaching, call it spiritual cleansing or healing or teaching. I'm just reaching out to humanity and reaching souls, awakening mindsets. Politics is not my intention, but I salute the black fist. So long as our people are still living in fear, believing that oppression is a way of life, hunger is a way of life, no face without a tear in their ghettos, dancing pain away in the doi doi dance. Do you still remember June 16th, 1976, Soweto Langa riots? September 12th, 1977. They lost lives fighting for our freedom. Burning flesh was a common sight. For equality, true equality, we continue. For how long, Africa? For how long? For how long, Africans? For how long? Do you hear this voice of mine? Do you hear your children cry? Banabataru ends to hear the song like ants and flies. We continue to die, trample these unseen oppressions. Our culture, we are left without expressions. The only equality we see is in constitutions, but in reality, I see oppression. Economically, there is still divisions. Unlock mental prisons and join in this mission. Sign this pledge if you see this vision of an equal Africa without segregation, without injustice. May God truly bless us all. Thank you. Okay, the energy field. We're about to start with day 3 of the program. We don't have much time today. We're going to move swifter than yesterday. We're going to get to the and get the job at hand done. Right, thank you so much. So the first panel discussion, can all the panelists please make their way to the stage and give them a round of applause. Philista, moderating. This panel discussion is focusing on climate justice, energy, and land. So I shall be paying careful attention. We shall all, as farmers, be paying careful attention as people who are concerned about food and hunger. Or moderated is focused on gender international. The panelists are Nanzala Lazarus over there, who is a climate and food security advisor at Oxfam in Africa, and but Baloyi over there taking her seat, who is from the Institute of Economic Justice, IEA, and Laurel, since day one. Laurel Olet, is it Olet, is that right? Is that all right? Utili. She's Executive Director of Rural Advancement for Land Rights Advocacy, AFRA. This should be Let's Talk Land and Climate Justice, right? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone.
Bonjour
Oh
tout le
my
monde.
goodness, what's happening? Good morning. The other greeting is Sanbon. Yeah. Is Siabonga as well a greeting? That's thank you. Oh, all right. Thank you so much. And I'm very delighted and honored to be able to moderate this session. As our moderator has mentioned, I have a very able panel that will help us today and the security, but also a bit of just transitions as well. So I think yesterday when we began our conversations, we alluded a bit to taking a model of intersectionality, because I think in all we recognize that it is imperative we are going to address issues of food security, then we also have to address the overlapping injustices to food insecurity. And I think also climate all across the globe experiencing the impacts of climate change, but more than others. South, which are countries such as the ones that are in Africa, are experiencing greater impact, yet they are not the biggest cause of climate change. So I think a sense of warning when we are having discussions, global north versus global south, and really what does that mean for us, not just as Africans, but South Africans and people of different countries in Africa. So I would like to start with you, if that's okay. Yeah, so, and maybe you can bring us to speed in terms of what is the linkages between food security and just transitions.
Thank you. This is like a mousetrap. You do the honors.
Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
To Oxfam for inviting me to talk on this very important issue. It has a diverse agricultural production system and is food secure at the national level in that it exports more than it imports. However, at the household level, it exhibits high levels of food insecurity and hunger. Before 80% had severely inadequate access to food. By March 2021, 35% of households could not afford adequate food, and 17% of households experienced consistent hunger. The Food Agency Organization in 2020 reported that 65%, 38.7 million people cannot afford a healthy diet. So I'll be making the case for why a just transition in food systems is central to contending with issues of food insecurity, and then proceed to outline some of the obstacles and opportunities to a just transition in the food system, which we must contend. Some of the biggest drivers which is contributing to rising food prices, a failed agrarian reform, and within the food system itself, high levels of exploitation and for within that system. So decreased state support since which increased domestic and northern retail buyers in relation to farmers and of value at the expense of the latter, led farmers to adjust labor costs through great impact. Why a just transition in food systems is important to achieve food security? Well, what is clear from the drivers of food insecurity is that the challenge is systemic in nature, created through the interactions of, in particular, important the structures of food production on the one end. These structures and relations create damaging environmental impacts. And then the systems by which food is provisioned and consumption norms are shaped on the other end. And these systems create poor nutritional outcomes, food insecurity, and exacerbate health inequalities. It creates the impact of reaching food system. A just transition is most fundamental to reconcile issues of sustainability, right? Green sustainability with social equity in the distribution of risks and benefits in the transition process. On one level, this requires the design of policy losers, adapting existing industries in an inclusive manner, and support innovation, job creation, and expansion of more ecologically sustainable activities. For development finance to fund what the market will not, and demand interventions markets for new and sustainable products and actors. On another level, given the injustices of the current need to confront existing inequalities and patterns of worker exploitation and precarity. Questions related to power, income, land, and the means of. So what are some of the obstacles that must be overcome to make this achievable? Namely, state capacity and path concentration and market power, and then this idea of greening existing production. I will also highlight some of the opportunities for change that these obstacles trigger. The current role and orientation of the state is an obstacle. Much of the discussion is within the energy system. More of food security, agriculture, social policy, health, education, and local government in a coherent good governance approach. This poor policy coordination is linked to the state's commitment to market rationality. In addition, in the food system, extensive democratized planning and coordination, but capacity to undertake these roles have been steadily eroded. Market rationality, the country's social and economic challenges. Rather than an active role in shaping food system outcomes, the state role has largely been one of abdication in governing the food system. As a result of the choices to deregulate the food sector in favor of market coordination, principally through the Marketing of Agriculture Acts of 1990. Mechanisms to lower and regulate the price of food would therefore be especially starting with low of staple food, so that people have more money for purchasing more nutritious food as well. Interventions to raise incomes through redistributive economic policy, social policy, and public interventions that support the ability of people to raise incomes are crucial to increasing access to and the ability to access planetary sustainable food. Public investments and the commodification of services to reduce and also frees up more household income for purchasing nutritious food. For example, Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Research with working class women has shown that the prioritization of household expenditure is generally transport costs, because this is to job income for the household and take care of other needs. Secondly, electricity for warmth, cooking, heating, water and lighting, paying off. Fourth, food comes forth as a priority, because out of the four, it is the most stable consumption item, at the expense, of course, of household nutrition. The implication is that affordable public transport and electricity would free up more resources for purchasing nutritious food. This also shows the deep linkages between food security and the broader just transition that should provide affordable public transport and affordable public clean energy. These systems are much interconnected, right? So to solve the food crisis is also to solve. The second just related to the of lock-ins and path dependency to more environmentally harmful development. Switching by the higher long-run economic costs of the transition to sustainability. And the creation of powerful economic interest groups which seek by means like political lobbying, protests, shaping consumer norms to obstruct sustainability initiatives. And inert in terms of a just transition towards sustainable food systems points to the necessity of a broad, progressive social coalition able to instigate necessary pressures and indeed our institution towards sustainability transitions usually happens as a result of strategic engagement emerging from prior collective organizing and building from below. There are various forms of critical various parts of the food system, but the balance of power still seems in favor of organized commercial agriculture and dominant corporate food actors. In this context, a number of apparent challenges regarding the role of organizing of actors from below in the food system may still be worth further discussion. Related to dependencies, the obstacle to instigating a just transition in the food system is the existing corporate competition and power in the food system, which plays an important role in determining the conditions of agricultural production, shapes the market, as well as the nutrition abdication of food governance role. Private actors through pricing, imposing standards, policy interventions. There are thus significant vested interests entrenched in the current economic political range system. So increasing regulatory capacity, including competition policy, is important, but another lower hanging fruit to balance the power of existing retail-led corporate food system that could be exploited is the role of local governments in informal food systems. Informal food systems are a central food access point through which many working-class households access portions of their food and are thus important to security. Role in determining their frequently hostile towards informal traders, often viewing them as nuisances to be suppressed, rather than finding ways to integrate into the local architecture of public life in more equitable and dedicated ways. This is also linked to the issue of the state's conceptions of a good of large-scale commercial, as seen in the initial planning of informal traders under COVID hard lockdown, while allowing supermarket chain stores to stay open and associated food crisis this misstep caused in townships. This bias is further perpetuated by the neglect by local governments of public infrastructure for marketing and trading, which might further reinforce the symbolic power of corporate supermarket retail actors in South Africa. Another obstacle to just transitions within food systems is greening existing relations of production. On the one hand, prevailing methods of production depend on practices harmful to the environment. Entrenched at the level of knowledge of farmers, the services, and the economic interests that are organized around high input agriculture. At the same time, the ecological question is on board within the dominant production structure. Quality standards can raise barriers to enterprises to obtain technology required for compliance. Green upgrading food value chains often involve firms, especially major supermarkets, that pass on the costs and the risks of compliance to the upstream segments of chains, example farmers, without reward to the share of value addition. Therefore, greening the existing production structure address questions of justice, could reinforce existing distributional patterns, as well as the deeper questions of transformation, like that of its relation to the unfinished business of agrarian reform, of just transitions. Once again, state policy can play a significant role here through extension services, technological transfer systems, and the reorientation of marketing boards would support green upgrading and ensuring that the costs of green upgrading are fairly distributed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Baloyi, for that great analysis around just transition in food systems. I've picked a few things: market coordination, regular food, household nutrition, as well as the role of government, both as well as the local governments that are more closer to the people. I think I will invite Olit to give us additional analysis on the linkages between land and climate change, but also how that's linked to food security. Welcome, Olit.
Thank you. And morning, everyone. Sanbonani from KZN, as we. So, to our first panelist for covering so thoroughly the issues around the food system, which means I can take most of that as said, and I agree with every aspect. A lot easier to focus on the other two critical areas around land and climate, particularly, and how the system, the corporate talking about. I mean, it's interesting if you look around and look at what Oxfam stands for, and we've been talking about, and yet inequalities of every kind have been growing globally, as well as in South Africa, where we provide the extreme example. But at the same time, we are seeing the urgency and the scope of the climate crisis, and it's really become a lot more tangible in our everyday lives. And it puts even greater pressure on land rights as we see growing inequality and the impacts growing climate change. See that land and food become increasingly unequal in turn. In addition to all the long-standing existing challenges that many of us have been working on for decades, there's also new challenges that are emerging and becoming more critical. So one change I think we've seen and heard through the discussions over the last 2 days, but really globally, is that there is an increased understanding of this intersection between these crises and the need and understanding that each issue is embedded within layers of these different kinds. So land is increasingly seen less as a standalone issue and more as a cross-cutting and underlying issue that needs to be addressed in a more systemic way. But it also puts us, we see connectedness, and yet we still work in our silos in many ways that we're used to working. So if we can see the change, how are we adapting to that change ourselves? I think is one of the critical questions. Find a way forward today in terms of how we want to take work around food security forward collectively. I do think it's been very strong here, but globally as well, there has been an increased discussion around the land rights of women and youth in particular. And I think what's important to highlight here is an increasing acknowledgement of the need to challenge the long-standing discriminatory norms that we see in 10 years to land, including land for food. So I think what's one of the big challenges I hope will be discussed later when we talk about the way forward is we can talk about the effects of inequality, and we can against those. Women have less access to land for X, Y, Z reason. We've done some analysis around that already. There's challenges, but are we doing anything to change the drivers of that inequality rather than just deal with the effects? Because if we're just playing around in mitigating the effects, we're not really changing anything. So I think that's the level of challenge that we need to throw at ourselves today. We've also heard a fair amount over the last couple of days, but particularly yesterday afternoon, the discussion around digitalization and how that can help overcome some of the challenges in the food sector and the agriculture sector. But it's also an important one because a majority of land rights and people's ability to negotiate access to land and to be secure on that land is undocumented and off record. So there's a lot of innovation around how digital systems, particularly pro-poor digital systems that are emerging, can help map and record those rights to increase security, but can also then link into land use. How is land being used, and how can we use these digital technologies for more than one purpose? So I think that's an interesting linkage to look at taking forward. And we see in some other countries in Africa, there have been significant developments in looking at comprehensive land information systems, as well as more comprehensive information around production, and particularly small-scale, because there's enormous amount available on large-scale commercialized agriculture. But in terms of your smaller-scale farmers, they tend to be invisible. So I think South Africa, we're lagging. Well, there are other countries in Africa who are moving ahead of us in terms of access to land information. One other key issue that brings together these is looking at large-scale land acquisition by large corporate entities, the kind of what we refer to as the agro-industrial elites. And this is less of an issue in South Africa than in many other African countries. To understand that the way that the corporate food system plays out at that level in terms of land means that it leads to a huge number of rural are losing livelihood opportunities. It's creating enormous conflict, and it results in people having much less opportunity to be independent in their own control of their food production, as well as the quality of their food, and it disrupts localized food systems and pushes people into the corporate food systems that we've been hearing about. It also obviously has massive ecological impacts, and studies over the last decade have shown that this idea that selling to large agriculture would result in better employment, better markets. Actually, the returns are not what has been projected or promised. So we're seeing that the idea is not really for local economies and local people. So our rural livelihoods, in many cases, are being increasingly threatened. Have seen new data showing us exactly the extent of land inequality and how it's growing. So currently, the latest data is showing that 1% of farms operate 70% of farmland. So when you're looking at land concentration, so fewer people owning more and more and more land, this is one of the critical challenges that we're facing. And I really want us to hold on to that and be very conscious as we move forward. We need to directly challenge a system that is supporting that. And in terms of South Africa, we have seen the same concentration of more and more farms being sold to neighboring farms, and this consolidation. So we're getting bigger and bigger farms. And again, this links directly into the corporate food system and the economic system that we live in where to compete commercially and to stay in the game, there has been this need to play system, and it means more monocropping. It means that we're seeing more and more, obviously, ecological impacts as well as inequality for people and their everyday lives. But it also means that farmers are less able to adapt to the changes in our climate. Because if you are growing maize, for example, at a very large scale, changes in when we see massive droughts or floods, it's not easy to change your production system to global trend, not just in Africa, but it is a real threat when we look at food production, that when you have smaller scale mixed farming systems, they're much more adaptable to these kinds of impacts. And I think many of the farmers in the room that I've spoken to do a lot of mixed production. And that really does mean that if one area, if you're struggling with one kind of crop production, you don't lose all of your income, you don't lose all of your crops, and you're still able to provide healthy food despite the challenges that you face. So, I mean, we've heard the discussions, and again, over the last couple of days around localized. So I won't too much, but I think it's really important to see how, while we talk about how important it is to have localized food systems, in South Africa, certainly, we're not finding, and it's really an area in which we look to our neighbors in Africa and see much more vibrant systems, and we have caved in, dominated. I really think we need to fundamentally challenge that system if we want to see real change, and not food security, but food sovereignty, people able to access to healthy. So, on the positive side, seeing the exacerbations of inequality and crises has meant that there has been greater mobilization around saying we need more coordination. We need to really work outside of our silos. But of course, we all say that. The question is, how do we do that? And I think, we can unpack the current situation. We've got fantastic research happening. We've got really interesting insights, stories that have come from what's actually unfolding on the ground. But how do we change what we do in response to that? Rather than just analyzing and saying we need to change. I also want to just reflect on the work we've been hearing about over the last few days, the amazing exhibition. Those who haven't seen it yet, please do go and read stories in the photo voice next door. They'll speak to your heart. And we've heard of the incredible work that's been done on the ground by women activists. And I mean, we can't not respond to what's happening. If someone's with eviction, we need to be there to support them. If a child is hungry, we need to work to feed them. Spend so much on responding to those needs that we are not finding the energy to challenge the systems that are creating those situations. And I think therein lies the challenge, because it's not about an and or. Not that we should stop. We're all and changing lives. But that work needs to be contributing. If we want to see real change, we need to be able to make the connections for ourselves and saying, how is the work I'm doing here to make a difference now, contributing to a different future? And that is where I think to have to work together, because many of us play in the space of international conventions. We've heard about whether it's regional, African Union, whether it's at our country level, we work on policies, we try and show the realities of rural communities to try and influence policymakers. And sometimes we have an impact, see what make an input, but our impact has been limited. So I think for me it's around taking the work being done around building partnerships that are very deliberately bringing us together from different sectors in very practical ways to share skills and knowledge. There's some of us who have detailed information around the agricultural policy is moving. Some of us have been working around the climate change, but that's being the public hearings at the moment. But how do we bring those different areas of together and say, okay, I engage government around the in a way that is showing the need for change around land and agricultural systems at the same time. So we're not just focusing on one issue at a time and together. None of us can become expert on everything. We just can't. But we have knowledge, and we can advocate together, we can stand together. So I think one thing that does hold us together, it can also divide us, but principles and values can really be a very strong connecting force. And for me, what I've heard through the threads of the last couple of days, apart from the central one around equality, I've heard a lot of talk about the principle of accountability, the principle of transparency, and that of inclusion. So I hope those are principles that can bind us together as we find a way forward from the symposium.
Thank you very much, Utli, for that analysis. Quite a few of agriculture, especially around land, looking at also comprehensive information systems, ownership and production as well. I think also you have given us quite a bit in terms of the analysis around the agro-industry, disruption of our local ecology around that, as well as also the ownership for our people and the communities, especially the small-scale farmers. And I think the best part was, I think it's more of a like clarion call. We need to be better coordinated and make sure our movement is sustained, resourced, and also well mobilized. Thank you very much for that. So then I'll take it to Nanzala, who is our final panelist, and Nanzala will be speaking on the overall policy in this area, the region, as well as the level, and also speaking a bit to that dynamic between the global north, global south, power, and negotiations. Nanzala,
yeah. And thanks for those who have gone prior. So just to get in the room, what were the worst droughts that we had in the past year, like the ones we can remember? At least I know the South Africa one because Cape Town in a lot of problems. Malawi, Mozambique, Kenya, Horn of Africa. Anyone? You'll be surprised that one of the worst droughts that we have had in the past years was in California, in the US, in Germany, in Italy, which is now just ending. They were like the worst in 60 years. The one in California was actually 100 years. But why are we focused on the ones in Africa? And I think that's where what Basani has talked about connects, is the system. But what connects all is the issue of poverty. That there is extreme poverties in this context. That is bad in, let's say, 30 years past. Of course, to the extreme caused by the cost of climate, the impact of climate change, then it is much bigger. The government has to declare a state of emergency, and much bigger than what is happening in other parts of the world. But to bring it home also, and back to the issues of policy and how this works, this issue. And personally, I always feel that it's with the government, because that's where we pay our taxes, and that's where we give our resources, that's where we have also donated part of our power, and we expect that be able to invest more in this. And one of the key policies that funded people, comprehensive Africa Investment Program, CADEP, and the one that was agreed in Maputo in 2000. Very well enhanced in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea in 2014. And it has a number of commitments that, and key to it is in agriculture, in finance. In a report that was released last year at the AU General Assembly in Addis, only one country in the whole of Africa is on track to achieving the whole of Malabo Protocol. When does the Malabo Protocol end? 2025, which is just, we can see it is on the horizon. And what are some of the key commitments that our country is committed to? Ending hunger by 2025 and halving poverty by 2025. Just even the way we looked at it, like we have had the worst drought in the region, it can quickly show that we are not even close to achieving that. And that means that our governments have really failed us from that extent. Climate side, one of the things that came out, for example, from Paris Agreement in 2015 was also that there was this creation of the adaptation. Many of us, I know, might have interacted with that as well. And the goal of the global goal on to the realization as a sector contributes to the issues of climate change, but can also be a big contributor to solving greenhouse gas emission. And outside maybe South Africa, in Africa, which I think was also mentioned earlier, the rest of the continent, it's maybe less than 0.00%. I think it's only in South Africa because I eat apples in Nairobi from South Africa. A lot of the wine, the best wine we have in Nairobi is from South Africa. So you do export a lot from here to the rest of the continent and global. So it's your food is more industrial, but the rest of the continent, we are just trying to adapt to the cost of climate change. So, and I remember this past year in Egypt at climate debate in the agriculture sector. Are we mitigating, so which means we want to reduce our emissions, or are we adapting? And the rest of Africa is very clear that our agriculture sector cannot even cope with the cost. We have like a quarter of what we are experiencing. But who is at the heart of this cost? Very important. And I think, I don't remember her name, but she really mentioned, yes, she mentioned yesterday, like she brought it out very clearly. I think in Africa, 40 to 60% the labor, but the people who do work on the farms are women. But they are also, where she ended on the issue of land ownership. They own the little. So it also means that they don't have the power, so they are just helping and push. But it has also been shown, and I think FAO released a report some time back which showed that, again, the same women reinvest 90% of what they get from the farm to the land. And personally, I've learned this because I've grown most of my time with my mom since I was just starting my teenage years. And we had a small farm that we were working in. And I could see, and even today, when I send my mother some money, if I don't be specific and planting season, for example, if I don't tell her this is just for your own use, I don't put it in the farm, all of it will go in the farm. So I have to ensure that, yes, it's specific for your use, but then for you to maybe and all that. Because the future, like my mom thinks, if we don't have food during the harvest, then what will my grandchildren, when they come home during closing, what will they eat? So it's very important when we say we need a coordinated approach, the way she said, and I'll try and summarize from there. When we focus on the CADEP framework, then from the civil society point, we need to focus our efforts on pushing our government, even to what they have committed to. As CADEP comes to an end, there are discussions within the African Union on the framework. Which shape will that take? When African leaders were meeting in Maputo, it was a blanket 10% investment in agriculture. Like, we need to see at least 10% investment in agriculture. I think when it went to Malabo, there was a lot of involvement of the private sector. And a lot of it was switched on issues of financing and all that. And I think that's where, as civil society, we need to unite together and develop knowledge in those spaces, like work. And as I said, Oxfam, we have been trying, but yeah, Oxfam is just one player, like a small one, especially. And when you look, I think it's countries track were reporting on the same indicator. It means that a lot of the work that is happening within our countries is never reported. And if a country, like a nation, cannot, it becomes almost useless. I think I'll finalize, Felista, on at the regional level, especially when it catch. We have really, I think for me, I lay it number one on investment and also on research. I think research have not invested. And I speak on the context of Kenya. We have what we call livestock and agriculture research organization. When you go there and you are talking to the people working there, so you are doing this research, whatever, like it's donor funded. Technology is not even owned by our governments. So I think that's where also we need a lot of focus, even if we are engaging in some of these spaces. The buck stops with our countries and our governments. And we have to see how maybe that needs to end. Maybe also to the issue of land inequality. I think that's also, like, there's one indicator that measures land ownership within the CADE framework. And I think even in reporting, only one country, I think, is either Egypt or Congo that attempted to report on the same, out of the 51 countries that reported on CADEP. So it also means that I think the issues of digitization, we have had that even in Kenya a lot, the government speaking of that. That's needed, because then if even you don't know who owns land where, it's ailing that Felista. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Picture of accountability where our government, but also speaking to the idea of sovereignty, even as we talk about this, our own research resources, research institutions. So the room, reactions and questions. So we have approximately minutes. I don't want us to exceed that. So raise your hand, and then a microphone will be brought to your hand there, and then there's another one. So
thank you for panelists. I just want to contribute one more thing. It's not completely climate change related, but a very big contributor to the food prices, and that is geopolitical forces. And specific is the war in Ukraine and Russia, which contributes to the prices. Oil, grain, all of these things contribute to the price and the food prices here. And I think that we just need to add this to the mix. I think it affects us all.
All right. Thank you. You can proceed, and then we'll come to you, please.
So good morning, everyone. As I have not greeted anyone yesterday, just taking this opportunity to do so. First, I just want to say congratulations to the speakers. You have brought in key reflections, and it made me think about three things. First one, I just want to borrow from the first speaker. The NATO war on Ukraine and Russia, I call that net war, I'm repeating that, net war, has exposed most of our abilities as a continent, and we must recognize that. It's painful to see a continent like Africa.
Recording in progress.
That we do have, including land, to sit and cry because rice is not coming, wheat is not coming. That is painful. We should really think carefully about that. Here are a few Africans trying to reflect on food systems, but we reflect issues now, adolescents, so that we address fragilities that are exposed. That is one thing. The second thing is, I think Nanzala just brought that reflection, but I would question myself. What are the key areas of climate discourse that could address as Africans so that we address the issue of food? If you, for example, just take the area of climate adaptation, what that we're adapting? We're adapting what is sold by the global north.
Yeah.
I don't like that discourse of global north, but that's a reality. Yeah. So if we look at the issue of local knowledge, nature-based that is so of the key issues on climate adaptation without begging, because we do have that knowledge. I think Nanzala talked about research, which is knowledge production or knowledge systematization, I would put in that way. We need to really think about to do that. And I like the way Nanzala put it. Who need to invest? It's not the donors, it's us.
Yeah.
Through our minds in the pocket of government. And we need to address those issues, otherwise we'll keep repeating the talks. The third thing I wanted to highlight is about food sovereignty. And we can only address issues because we should be sovereign in producing food, eating our food. And adaptation is key to that discourse. We are our own food. So those are some of the reflections I wanted just to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, the gentleman in blue. Please, a microphone.
Thank you, session moderator. I'm Simon from. I'd like to ask two short questions. I won't be long. One question is, how are you, as the civil society, going to deal with the issue of the competition for land, whereby you find that artisanal small-scale miners are occupying or are taking the land that sometimes the women, smallholder farmers, are utilizing for farming. Because you find that in many countries, especially, in many countries, some cultural norms, they just disempower women in terms of owning the land. So now, if maybe a man comes with a mining permit and say, just take the land from women who have been utilizing that land for agriculture, I think it's something we need to think about. And second and last, on the issue of CADEP, I think the government is quite poor. I was in a meeting whereby there were government departments from different SADC countries, and they were indicating that they are not collecting the information that they are supposed to collect. So that's why scoring is very poor if you compare it with other countries in the continent. So I would just like to ask us as civil society, or maybe even the advice from the presenters in terms of how can we present an alternative report in terms of what we know about what is happening on the grassroots, because what they report there is not true, since they are not collecting all the information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and please bring the microphone here. Okay, so I think let me allow first the panelists to respond to that, and then I've seen several hands, and then we can do another round. So I think there are 2 questions for you, Nanzala, and then Baloyi, or you can, I think you can speak both. Yeah, to the left. Nanzala.
Yeah, so I think I fully agree with my brother, like 100%. The CADEP report is one of the worst if you engage the way the AU does. But it's also the challenges of our diversity as a continent, like just in place, but they depend on blocks, so SADC, East Africa, the Maghreb region and all that. But then the technical capacity is down. But one of the try and measure sanction. They are put it a minister say, yeah, this is what you are saying. But even with the exaggerations in the reporting, they are still even not halfway there. Compare that with what's happening on the ground, it actually tallies. If, like, only one country, like in Kenya, they said is on track to ending hunger by 2025. Of course, but 50 countries are not on track. We can see that. So, of course, a bit there can be quite different. Of course, the issue of land, I think my colleagues here will be better placed to speak about that.
Utli?
Great. Well, thanks so much for those useful inputs and questions. So I think I have a few things to respond to on a few different issues that I hope you'll give me more than just the land issues. I think the first is this question around how much can we rely on government? How much of our energy do we want to choose to spend on, you know, whether it's engaging them around policy, whether it's holding them accountable for implementation? We need to do that. They have critical roles, and we do need to hold government accountable. But I also think at the same time, we, you know, in the absence of government, there's a lot that we can build ourselves. And I think we need to balance our thinking between saying there's a certain amount of energy we have that we can put into very strategic accountability. But we have thrown so much time and energy into that at the cost of developing more robust systems that we ourselves can manage, that don't rely on government. Politics, and you know, we have new ministers and they take things in a completely different direction. So I do think we need to be balancing it, and we can't just throw our energy into forcing a government that is not responsive to do its job. Yeah, so I think we need to balance them. I do want to say, and I know this, civil society not just in South Africa, but my colleagues in other African this is getting. We, my own organization, over time, I've seen it in sister organizations who are, some of whom closing doors, some of whom on the brink, others of whom we've shrunk our staff teams dramatically. Funding is more, we know this. I'm not saying anything new here, but what I'm trying to do is remind us that when we keep civil society must be careful, because we have to choose very carefully where we can have impact with the limited time and resources that we have, and not say, oh, we're going to do all these things, when we know actually we need to choose 1, 2, 3 critical interventions and push them hard. Just also wanted to say that networking and joint working, fantastic. I'm self-advocate for them. They take enormous amounts of time and money on top of the work that we're already doing. So I just also, again, want us to remember that when we talk about networking, sharing skills, knowledge, that touch on the question. I think there's a particular challenge we're facing in South Africa, and I'm not on top of African countries. Issue around mining rights is, and I don't, this is not just a local issue, this is a global issue. Yeah. We're seeing fights in America, in England, and many other countries around mining industry are getting the reciprocal relationship and mining rights that are being given to people, and we see changes in the law in South Africa. In some cases, communities to consent to mining on their land. So we're seeing a rollback of the protection of rights, even in our democratic South Africa. So it's a critical challenge, but I think it's more than just the land rights. It's this issue of extractive industries and the impact that that is having on our ecology, on our economies, and on our food systems. Alternative reports at all levels, I think, are important, and I think people-centered data systems where we don't just rely on official data. So we've been working with the International Land on looking at how we can use society by communities to be able to produce data systems that can show the reality as well as integrating it. So I think there are tools there, and I'm very happy to chat to anyone about that. We want to look at how we can integrate climate indicators in there, and agriculture and food production and is already there. It is the portion of international funding for adaptation rather than mitigation is absolutely minuscule. And I think the importance of focusing on pushing hard for increasing that, and I think we need to keep growing that lobby. But in terms of local knowledge, a fair amount of work in South Africa particularly, capturing emerging. I think there's a lot of people who have really great examples of adaptation and local knowledge systems that's being captured. We're trying to find ways to bring that together and make it more accessible. So again, anyone who is interested in that, please do find me. I'd love to chat more about it. Thank you.
All right. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the correction on the absence of speaking about what you call the NATO-Ukraine war. Mm-hmm. I think similar to, you raise the fact that, we need to think about how we respond. And this is a similar discussion to the COVID pandemic as well, where we all knew that our health systems are in crisis and they are under pressure. There's not much public into public institutions. Healthcare workers are overstretched. They are not given much medicine, like all that was known. And then you have this thing that exposes these vulnerabilities. Similarly, we all know the fact that we need to localize our production systems. We need resilient food systems, right? We've known that. And then you have such a thing that exposes, right? The fact that we are out. So mentioning it is part of an analysis to say, well, example, but I don't think it takes away from the recommendation demands that have been put to others around the need to lower our food production because of what happens. I guess you it as a platform, as a rallying platform. But there's a lot that has been said that hasn't been done. And we need to think about how we push forward, using what has always been said to get things done. You mentioned, the issue around knowledge production and diminishing knowledge production so that we're not relying on donors. The sad thing about this is that if you're not getting money directly through donors in other African countries, you are still getting money through donors because the donors contribute, I think in Mozambique, 60% to your budget, something like that, right? And that comes with particular strings attached to what you are told to direct your money to. And that can be something that actually undermines your policy autonomy. I was so heartbroken by a report that I was reading. Actually, it's a report in Africa that we wrote, where in South Africa, we have the privilege that is running. This privilege is running. That most of our debt is rand denominated, and it's not from international financial institutions. But after the COVID, loan from the IMF. And then you read the letter of intent. These guys are giving us a lot of money, guys. It's like, how many? Like a couple of billions, right? Not much. But you read the letter of the investment that they are expecting us to in order for us to accept this loan. It's scary, right? And so this is how we are gorged from doing exactly, which is the need to actually, use our own knowledge, right, in order to build our systems. And somehow benefit. It was to agree with you, but like there are certain challenges and forces that are at play, which then leads me to say, I agree with you on the need to balance these, like, build from below and figure out alternatives. But then when it comes to money, it becomes really dirty. Because the constraints, it's strategic discussion we can have forever, but thanks.
Yes. I want to ask the moderator for permission because we already passed. If I can take the 3. Yes. Give her a microphone for some time. Please lift up your hand. She's here in blue. Then there was there. You still want to ask the question, so keep your hand up. Then we'll do you, and then we'll close. So you will be the last. There at the that side, yes, yes, yeah. So please be succinct so that the time, yeah.
Yeah, thank you thank you for the presentations. It's always nice to, as you said, the fact that the chicken in the shops that people buy, they don't have money. The all these things, and people to buy free range, for instance. You know, and yet our staple food, maize meal, it's in the fish oil, the chips that children eat, the cereal, GMOs, and excessive use of pesticides, and diabetes, and blood, and the cancer rates that's so high, you know, and yet I don't see that we can't do. If the people eat, I mean, we need a rising from the ground up, because the organizations can't do it. You know, the stand up, and food policies say around do it. And the issue of adjustment, where are we in the conversations? There were women in Mpumalanga and they brought out a plan. It's our only livelihood. You know, government aren't speaking to us. Nobody's speaking. That breathe in our homes. And yet we know coal isn't good for people's health, nor the environment. And I was thinking, are we moving in the conversation? And it's also threatening food. They're speaking about the skin conditions people have, the water that's contaminated, the food, everything is contaminated. And really suffering. Part of the way forward, I speak on collaboration more, because we need to collaborate if we want maximum change. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. So the two ladies, please keep your hands up so that you can get the microphone. Oh, okay, you can proceed to, yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Francina Nkosi, based in Lepalale, under Waterberg Women Advocacy Organization. Thank you to the panel discussion. My point to go to the climate change part. We know very well that colonialism, it was all about the wealth, and it's all about changing the way people think. It doesn't have any vision. Part is we know that in our municipality, most about my municipality, they don't have the climate change plan. And will it be best that each and every municipality plan, so that to mitigate? Because now, what did happen at KZN, to our side at Lepalale, we did have, and of municipalities don't know how to react to that. But if every municipality know how to react if there is a crisis, I think that way it will also save and also save the economy. Because what Basane just talked about is, if we, I did think about, if there is a climate change, and there is a woman who needs to process something, if it's low, it won't be, because the economy goes down also, because now there's no need to know you can't do it. And most of women, they are going long way to fetch firewood, and also it's not for women. It also is that it needs to go down from the bottom up so that it also internationally for each and every province, every municipality to have a climate mitigate the crisis that we face in each and every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Pass it to her. There.
Thank you so much, moderator and our speakers. My name is Anna Riondo. I work with Oxfam in Uganda as Seed Rights Coordinator. I have one concern that I want to highlight in regard to disaster management, the food insecurity. And in Africa, in different countries, we have a number of disasters that are natural and others are induced by man. So my question is around how best can we prepare communities in line with mitigation, response, or how can they be resilient in case a disaster strikes? Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Then the last question. Please raise your hand.
Yes, mine is also more on the, because the relationship between climate and agriculture. So talking from the farmer point of view, I don't know how the organization can actually help the farmers to be much more involved in terms of coming with the robust strategies that need to be put in place in terms of helping the resiliency of the crop. I sit as a chairperson for Gauteng, the veggie and fruits commodity. Just the number of farmers that produced, I mean that normally, we will meet and record the yields that the farmers are expecting. But last year, there was a very significant reduction in terms of farmers that planted. They chose because of the previous experience from the previous years. What farmers to get the information, projections, because and all that, as a result, they get very discouraged because a lot of crop and no one is interested in also reimbursing. It discourages from investing their little income into producing. But I believe that maybe there is a way on or a platform like this where farmers are starting to be exposed and or having the climate projections so that they are supported in terms of projecting their production, because otherwise it keeps on just declining and declining. But if you look at it, it's an information and a lack of strategy adaptation.
Thank you very much. With that, our panelists will respond and then we'll close this session. So I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm going to take this opportunity to say goodbye to everyone. I'm really sorry, I have to rush off to the airport now. It's been a fantastic couple of days. A huge thank you to Oxfam and to partners old and new. Lovely to see you all engage, debate, and I wish you great discussions for the rest of the day and enjoy the cocktails tonight. So just a quick response, very specifically on the question of municipalities having disaster planning. So there is part of the adaptation funding, certainly in South Africa, that is being accessed through our national body that can apply for the international funding, which is currently SANBI, the Biodiversity Institute of South Africa. has focused on capacity building for municipalities, and they're looking at improving that and rolling it out at a wider scale. The new climate change bill that's going through public consultations now will require every government department and every municipality to have a climate risk assessment and plan. So it's coming. Keep an eye out, and I think the more we can work with our municipalities on that, the better, so we can help improve those plannings and to make sure that our most vulnerable communities are not excluded from their thinking. We can help our farmers and communities be more ready for their participation tools for working with communities on assessing their existing adaptation, understanding climate change and adaptation better, and developing community plans. Really well and robust tools that we've used in our community and other organizations have as well. It is quite time, labor, and cost intensive is the challenge. So I'm not sure how we take that to a bigger scale, but we are really good materials that are free, that are available, and can be shared. And then just lastly on the early warning system discussion. So the South African Weather Service is the only official approved share long-term and medium-term forecasts. I hope many of you get those. They're incredibly useful for our farmers. Again, just contact Oxfam or myself to get access to that. But in terms of the immediate pending weather issues, they only issue those to municipalities, and they rely on municipalities to get that information out. And we know in many cases that isn't happening. There are discussions starting to happen with the Weather Service around saying that needs to be public information, not just held by municipalities. So I think it's an absolutely critical issue to how we can develop early warning in addition to farmers respond to immediate threats. Thank you, and sorry to have to leave. I'm sure I'll see you all soon.
We'll need to give you an applause for that good job. Thank you. So I'll proceed to you, and then to Nanzala, and then we can close.
Okay, I think Laurel took a lot of the slog work, so thank you for all the responses. So I'm going to respond to something maybe that wasn't mentioned on just transitions, which was your question. And basically what I hear from your question, there is a lot of exclusion in terms of people depending on particular livelihoods, their inclusion in the process of determining the decisions. So the Presidential Climate Commission had a series of conferences, talks, discussions in Mpumalanga. Their Just Transition Framework document, right? And much of those discussions, like the framework document, you can say, was a highly consultative process of arriving at where it was. And within that, the food systems was one of the things that was part of that framework document. And then you hear in 2026 about this Just Energy Transition Partnership deal that has been negotiated between South Africa and like these global, like 5 countries in Europe, where they're committing to in our just energy transition. So civil society was not part of that process, right? We included. The investment plan does basically is to move towards, I'm a economist, like a development economist. So we talk about this big D, development with the big D, which is the kind where you are investing in big things that basically don't generate a lot of jobs, but like they need more machinery to produce. Instead of a small D, which actually is like grassroots, can like employ. This is what it does. There's food systems is not part of it. It's just nothing about adaptation. It's mainly just about the energy transition. We're investing in green hydrogen, all these very fancy things, right? That really to the people of Malanga in terms of surviving this transition, right? So I agree with you. In terms of like, we can have these policies that are not resourced or funded, and they will invite us in their processes. But as soon as money talks, now we have got this 5 billion discussion, right? And yet, your energy transition has already been negotiated for you, right? What it includes, what it doesn't include, it's already been negotiated for you. And so this is really the injustice of this system. And I do think, great, like, and this is the thing about even the financing, which is that there's a way in which finance is constructed in a way to deceive technical, you know what I mean? And so there's mobilizing that needs to happen in translating what these financial instruments are, and how they're going to impact. And so I want to be to speak systems. You can't get away, or just transitions. You can't get away from speaking about issues of transitions as well, and their financing.
Anything else would like to add, Nansala?
I have 1 minute or 2?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I think one thing is, I think what you mentioned on research, and I think for me when I was speaking about it earlier, it's ideal and what's real, but also thinking about short-term and long-term. What is ideal is that should be funded by our governments through taxpayer funding. What is true to the long term, to do that by them? They can't run away, and COVID taught us that. You see how swift in the context quarters in certain nations. We saw when it came to Ebola, for example. It doesn't. Why? Because it's predominantly in Africa, and there's no investment by governments in the region. Malaria has been with us for the longest, because we still depend on that. So even in the area of, if we want to have sustainable food systems, agriculture especially, then our governments have to commit to that. So I think I was looking at it. And within the CADEP framework, the target is to spend 1% of the agricultural GDP to research, like invest that in research. So every country or every member state should like look what is the agriculture GDP, then commit to at least over until 2025 as they were, 20% of that in research and development, which of course none of us has been able to do. And I think maybe briefly GMO and this personal, like I'm not an expert like in the science, but from reading and doing that by and large GMOs have a bit of safety, because in medicine we have already been using GMO. But with a caveat in that, given that is new, it also need a lot of regulation, as you said. So be able to consume or not. But to the bigger picture in the space of food security, for me, I look at it, what I'm worried more is test out, and I think that discussion was here yesterday a lot on this issue, so talking about seeds. reading a case, and that's more on the cotton and how the GMO seeds distorted that. And now farmers have to depend on this one supply of seeds. And that, of course, then will come back to health, because if I'm the big boy and I'm the one that have the good seeds, she might then come and also start investing in certain research that then standard seeds. And then you as the farmer, then maybe you can afford that and depend on that. So sovereignty for me is quite bigger than even the safety, but the safety, again, governments need to regulate. Yeah, I enjoyed the discussion, and back to you, Felicity.
Thank you very much. I think we need to give a loud applause.
And thanks.
Yes, and thank you very much to our panelists for doing a good job to unpacking the modern a little bit, also for being a very good audience and engaging with the discussion. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Being a part of this and for a great engaging session. And I understand that we would now, as time goes, we want more engaged in it. However, we are watching time as the last day. The program is jam-packed. So for future sessions, we are going to try to just cut off the question and answer segment a little bit for the sake of time.
ngipindoda beka manje suyajola endi manje sengiyayisola awuphenduli mangibona angisoze ngakuyeka I'ma keep on trying ngeke ngahluleka yonke imihla ngiyakhuleka live without you never wena uyafuneka wena ubuye kimi baby please come back to your lady give you loving on a daily Yakulisa baby Yakulisa baby I can never give up, even though I messed up. Seemed to make sense. Should've loved you better. Muntu wami ngoa, ngekuthatha unoa, ngeke ngiphume ngoa, bathatha injabulo yami. Wena ubuye kimi baby. Please come back to your lady. Give you loving on a daily. Yakulisa baby. Yakulisa baby.
Ndiyayazi ilizwi lendoda namali alivagani Ndiyakuthanda ntombazana ndiyakuthanda manyanyan andazi ndenze kanjani Ndiyakuthanda ntombazana mna ndiyakuthanda manyanyan andazi ndenze kanjani Ndiyakuthanda ntombazana mna ndiyakuthanda manyanyan andazi ndenze kanjani Ndiyakuthanda ntombazana mna ndiyakuthanda manyanyan andazi ndenze kanjani Ngamakama Diphelelwa ngamakama Ndiyakuthanda ntombazana mna ndiyakuthanda mna manyanyan andazi ndenze kanjani Ndiyakuthanda ntombazana mna ndiyakuthanda manyanyan andazi ndenze kanjani Ndiyakuthanda ntombazana mna ndiyakuthanda manyanyan andazi ndenze kanjani Nyathanda ntombazana mna ndiyakuthanda manyanya Ndiphelelwa ngamagama Ndiphelelwa ngamagama Ndiphelelwa ngamagama Ndiphelelwa ngamagama Amagama Amagama Usistop samsamala dressing kuselezi meleniza sepsiga Usisambrela samselangesi kusele malangina setlojeni Ulikunwa lamle chocolate limnandi njenge toffolax Andazi nenze anjani Funa makama nenyan Funa makama nenas Funa makama no tando Funa makama na manki Funa makama nenas Funa makama no tando Smakatu zokusela Pagati weza kwitela Pagati weza pusela Smakatu zokusela Pagati weza kwitela Pagati weza pusela Umago ndiyakuthanda Umago yandichaza Umago ndiyakuthanda Umago ndiyakuthanda Umago yandichaza Umago ndiyakuthanda
You gonna give to me today, 'cause you're not feeling good, all about you. And what you gonna give to me today, 'cause you had a bad day. Well, so did I, so did I, baby. Well, so did I, so did I, baby. Tonight, we're gonna talk about feelings. Tonight, we're gonna talk about all the things that I've always wanted tonight. You're gonna be making up for all the times when I needed you and you were not there. You were not there, yeah. never truly understand. Tried everything, but all you do is make me feel so bad for wanting you, for loving you, baby, for needing you. Baby, tonight we're gonna talk about feelings. Baby, tonight we're gonna talk about all the pain that I feel in my heart. Though I'm loving you still, I'm needing you still, though I'm wanting you still. Oh, baby, baby, feeling, things that I've always wanted to say. Can we talk about it? Give me some time, baby. All the things that I've always wanted to say. Yeah. Here's what we're gonna do. Here's what we're gonna do. Oh, baby, feeling. Yeah, we talk about it, baby. Oh, baby, feeling. Can we talk about? I wanna talk about my feelings tonight, baby. Can we talk about? Give me some time, baby. Feelings, oh yeah, 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 yeah. Give me some time, baby.
Another hits jam from wipeloaded.com.
Ewe ndiyavuma ndikhubekile kwigraf intuthu emehlweni am beningayazi zosuswa ubani beningayazi zosuswa ubani ewe ndiyavuma ndikhubekile mna kwigrave intuthu emehlweni am beningayazi zosuswa ubani beningayazi zosuswa ubani beningayazi zosuswa ubani Mgodi, mgodi ndizimela ngawe mgodi, mgodi ndizimela ngawe mgodi, mgodi ndizimela ngawe bendingayazi zosuswa ubani beningayazi zosuswa ubani mgodi, mgodi ndizimela ngawe mgodi, mgodi mgodi, mgodi, mgodi ndizimela ngawe mgodi, mgodi beningayazi zosuswa ubani oh beningayazi zosuswa ubani uzozibonela ngam uzozenzela ngam
Another hits jam from wipeloaded.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for the music. Please take your seats. We're about to start the next panel discussion. Are all the panelists mic'd up and seated? We have one outstanding. The panel discussion topic on the screen is not the correct one, but I think they're about to change it now, just to reflect the topic that we're discussing. It's still Mapule Maema who's moderating. Are you winning at the back there? Okay. No, that's incorrect, but I think they're trying to change it. How is it? Are we winning there? Not, we are. Okay, just a couple of seconds, beloveds, just a bit of patience. So this session that we're having now is a session that was meant to take place yesterday afternoon, but because of time constraints, we had to cut it. We were meant to begin with it this morning. It keeps shifting a bit, and now we are gonna definitely have it. Let's see. All right. So another thing is that this particular session will not be recorded by Oxfam, but we also ask that those people who are taking pictures and tweeting and being on social media, for this session it is closed. We can't for this session afford to have it recorded at all, so please just respect it just for this session. No cameras, no phones. If you want to tweet about it or talk about it, you can, as long as you don't take images. All right. Are my eyes failing me at the okay, there we go. Okay, the topic is not up, so I'm going to read about what the session is about, just to give you a picture. And then our panelists will take, our moderator, Mapule Maema, who is the program lead for Oxfam South Africa, will take it over from there. On the panel, we've got new people. Bo, who's going to be dealing with the challenges and working conditions of farm workers. We also have Ntakwana Maema from Oribi, who's going to be talking to us about market system as well as the way forward, what women want. We've got as well Pooja Adhikari from Oxfam, Germany. She's going to be highlighting enablers for a transformed African food systems. So it's bound, already from the topics, I think you can tell that it's bound to be interesting. It's a reflection into the status of labor rights, practices in the food value chains and systems, access to markets, and credit for small-scale farmers and agropreneurs. We're also going to be touching on labor rights practices, food value chains and systems, and credit for small-scale farmers. Objectives of this particular sessions, the specific objectives are to explore how to create an enabling environment that can strengthen a parallel and sustainable food value chains and system. So I think we are aware that we've discussed challenges quite at length, and this panel discussion will be more towards solutions. Of time to be succinct as we can, so that we can get everything that we need to do today done by the end of the day. Thank you so much. Please welcome everybody to the stage.
How are you? Well, good, thanks. So as it has already been indicated that about exploring how we can create an enabling environment and sustainable food systems. Drawing from the discussions that were held yesterday in this, would like to offer the opportunity to our panelists to engage with the intersectional issues that emanated from the discussions, be it your labor rights related issues that are linked to your food security. And earlier on, we heard from the earlier panelists that spoke about the impact of climate justice on ensuring food security in Africa, and also touching on later on the financialization or the need to finance like food security systems within the African continent. So just to kickstart us off, I thought it is important for me to touch on the Sustainable Development Goal, which aims at promoting inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and improved working conditions in targeted sectors. Also reminding us of the importance of the ILO Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work, which states the 4 fundamental principles, which are of association, effective recognition of the right to collective bargaining, the elimination of forced and compulsory labor, the abolition of child labor, the elimination of discrimination in respect of employment and education. So how this discussion is going to occur, the importance of development, making it to work. So that is why we're bringing in the labor rights aspect of it. We don't want to dwell too much on the challenges, but then we want to look at, from in the room, we've got the private sector, we've got departments, well, a few online. So try to see the role that us as key stakeholders, social compact can try and of, for example, women that are working on farms and across other value chains such as food retail sector, for example. And yes, so I think we'll start with Laura. So can you please give us like your 3 key challenges that you think we should perhaps look at when we're trying to like influence policy, or when we're trying to develop like your lobbying and advocacy campaign that are affecting
everyone. Laura, I'm from the Northern Cape, and I'm a seasonal worker. And first, I want to mention also, I'm 25 years. The reason why I am mentioning it is because people would also wonder, what is this little person sitting here and doing here? So at first, workshop, but our coordinator was asking, what is this little person doing here? Child, give me your to make sure that you are not an underage person taking part in our project. So I want to discuss our challenges as seasonal workers and women on farms. So firstly, I want to lift this challenge as employment without contracts. Our women on farms, the seasonal women, we struggle a lot with our farm owners. And the thing is that on the day when you are employed by that farmer, he would not choose to give you your contract on the day of employment. And as some situation may occur, then you are the one who wants to go and open a case at labor, but then you don't have a copy of your contract. So it's a struggle for us as women, and then our labor cases never get solved. Secondly, it's the work environment. I would say that our farmers and our owners who we are working for, they don't usually give us safety regulations on how we must work, and the introduction isn't proper. Our women are in places where we don't even have access to proper toilets and clean water while we are working in the vineyards and also in the factory. Also, our women are getting exposed to pesticides which affect our women. It gives us diseases, illness such as affecting our lungs and having some diseases of affecting our skin maybe sometimes. And most of the cases is whenever you are exposed to the pesticide, it affects you a lot. And most of our farm owners, they don't take it into consideration that it's actually an effect towards us as women. And also our living wages.